Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call this council meeting to order on April 10th at 5 p.m. And the land acknowledgement statement, Councillor Scholdice, I see you're joining us online, so I will turn that over to you for the statement.
Sure. Just 2 seconds, I'm going to get it in front of me. One second. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, my audio or my internet is kind of slow.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, awesome. So we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of the Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on with the agenda, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions by anyone to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and seconder that the agenda be approved as presented. Councillor Day, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time if one should arise. Minutes of previous meetings. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on March 20th, 2024 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member wish to make an announcement? The only announcement I would make would be congratulations to staff for Saturday and everything that staff did to make that such a success at Kemble. That was absolutely an amazing day, and the number of people that I understand went through that arena, I think, surprised most of us. So thank you to staff for everything you did there. There are no public hearings, delegations, or public question period. For items on the agenda, any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. And for items not on the agenda, it's the same information, but you must register by the Thursday preceding the meeting that you wish to speak at. And we do have a delegation today, Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, Stephen LaBelle. So welcome, Stephen. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here. My name is Stephen LaBelle. I'm here with Ed McGugan, who is the chairman of the board of directors of Saugeen Mobility. Saugeen Mobility is a company that was founded in 1977, provides specialized transportation services to persons with physical and or cognitive challenges. Now, normally we don't offer services to people that can go into a taxi. So that's where we make the distinction. So if you have to use a cane, for example, Saugeen Mobility will provide you with service. We are a charity, so we provide, we accept donations and we provide receipts. Each municipality, there are 10 who are part of the partnership of Saugeen Mobility, have a representative on the board of directors. So we have Ed McGowan, the chair, and we have a representative from the towns that you see on the screen that are board members. We also have office administrator, county clerk, and a dispatcher. We are a fully operational organization with a toll-free number, an email address, and a website, which means that anybody that needs a ride can go onto our website and put in a transportation request or send an email with their transportation request details. The company uses 20 vehicles, one 30-passenger bus, 10 9-passenger vehicles, and 9 accessible minivans. So we cover an area of about 5,000 square kilometers. It's the second biggest in Canada, and it's definitely the biggest in Ontario. Our current fees as of April 1st, 70 cents per kilometer for a minimum of $8 per ride. Ride being defined as one way. So if you need to go to the doctors, for example, well, there is one ride, coming back is another ride. So it's $16. Wait time charge of $24 per hour. Can ride with one attendant. And we also offer group rides. And the charges for those group rides will vary depending on your requirements. Georgian Bluffs, you currently have a population of 11,100 according to the 2021 census. If you were to come on to the agreement, to the partnership, we estimate that you could have a potential of 50 to 100 clients within your population. And that is the average number of clients per population of your size. We consider that most of the rides will be to Owen Sound, Wyerton, or for medical rides to London or the Greater Toronto area. Now, looking forward, and this is my last slide, we have an aging population in Ontario. The percentage of folks over 65 years old in the Grey and Bruce County is 26%. That's compared to 19% for Ontario as a whole. So we have an older population, more and more, a growing population as well. So basically the message here is that Saugeen Mobility will be there to help folks with transportation services. And as I mentioned, SMART has the largest coverage area in Ontario. And we will certainly be bigger with the addition of any more municipalities. We'll become the biggest in Canada, which is a challenge for us, but we welcome that challenge. Our drivers are well trained. They are used to driving long distances, and they're certainly used to operating the mechanisms that we have on our accessible vehicle. That's it for me.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm going to turn to council to see if anyone has any questions. Councillor Coburn.
So thank you for your presentation. Did I hear you say that if we were to come on, I take it our folks are not currently able to use these services? And what does that look like if we were to be able to offer that in our communities?
So the mechanism to join would simply be to have a bylaw that designates Hanover as a host municipality for the reception of gas tax funding from the province. So the funding for Saugeen Mobility is 3 ways. One is donations, have user fees, have the municipalities that are part of the partnership, and then you have the gas tax that comes from the Ministry of Finances, but also the Ministry of Transportation. So once that is done, you would then need to sign on the partnership along with the other 10 municipalities, and you would become one of the members of Saugeen Mobility. At that point, any resident within your jurisdiction would be able to contact us and put in a request for anywhere within Rainbows counties or to the outside of that region up to 20 kilometers. For medical rides, we can go as far as Burlington, Toronto, Pickering.
So in terms of the municipality's contribution, is that prorated based on population, or how do you determine how much we would contribute?
70% is normally assigned to the population. 30% is normally assigned to the population. 70% is based on a number of rides. But because there's no history for Georgian Bluffs, it would be prorated based on an average. But there are also other mechanisms that are possible.
If I may, thank you. And thank you for hosting us. One of the things we've been working on is what we call a menu of services. And the reason we're looking at a menu of services is specifically because we cover a broad range of different municipalities. The town of Hanover, which is a fairly small geographic area with a high population, perfect for transit systems. We also cover off a lot of smaller rural municipalities, such as here in Kinloss, which has really got only a couple of small towns, and everything else is all rural. So we do a lot of kilometers for a ride. So there's quite a variety of different departments. Give you an example, Chatsworth, just south of us here, they're Party Smart. It's been a struggle for Chatsworth because the economics are a bit of a challenge, simply because every single ride is subsidized by the municipality and the province through the gas tax. So that's why we don't advertise. We don't really want to have a dramatic increase in the number of rides, because that would cost the municipalities a lot more money. We want to provide the basic service without it getting too expensive. And Chatsworth has struggled with it a little bit because it was getting kind of expensive and they weren't sure if that was what they wanted to do. So we developed an essential service for them. It's on a pilot program right now. It just started literally 10 days ago. We don't know how it's going to all pan out. We hope that it'll work out really well. But what that does, it gives a fixed cost for the municipality, and the rest of the costs are borne by the clients. Now, that does make higher costs for the clients. However, lower income clients, such as those who are on Ontario support programs like ODSP, their rides are covered by the ODSP payments. So we think that this is going to be workable. I know our mayor to the south of us here is very happy with it. Staff, I believe, are as well. So we're hoping that works out very well. On the other end of the scale, we've got the municipality of Kincardine that wanted much higher level of service. They wanted to make sure that people could get a ride within 20 minutes. It's easy to do. All you have to do is hire a whole bunch more drivers and buy a whole bunch more vehicles. Nothing to it. The municipality of Kincardine opted not to include that in their budget, which is entirely reasonable on their behalf. They're looking at their options. But that's the menu that we currently are working on. The basic service is what we can call pretty much fully utilized. If you are on a regular schedule, every Thursday you go to the grocery store, or every Friday you go to the Legion, or every other Wednesday you go to a day-away program. Those get booked into the system, and I think 60% of our rides are those types of rides. But if you call up and say, hey, can I get a ride to the grocery store at 9:30 tomorrow morning? The odds are the answer is going to be no. Now, we have wonderful staff, and they're very good at using the software to adjust, and they may be able to get that ride for that person at 10:30 or 11 o'clock. So they can adjust a little bit, but it's not an on-demand service where you can get it within, it's not like a taxi where you can get a ride within 20 minutes. So that's the kind of thing that we're working on right now. Stephen, staff, our board, excellent hardworking board, really great staff. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've ridden on a lot of accessible buses and vehicles. Smart staff, drivers, and vehicles are the absolute best. I've been dumped off of lifts. I've been caught in lifts in the rain, went halfway up, but never on a smart vehicle. Our spring road tour next Friday, taking a smart vehicle. They work. Okay. I'd love to leave some of these cards with you folks. If good. And yeah.
Okay, and I'll look to the rest of council. Are there other questions? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, no, great presentation, and we do have to look at options, as you mentioned. We are aging and kind of getting into that bracket myself, so we have to start to look at options to how we get moved around. My question to you was, though, do you have home base as Hanover? Or where is home base for the smart?
Just north of Walkerton, Solway.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah.
That's where the office is.
Okay.
But the drivers are distributed throughout the whole region. And we have a very collaborative approach because we're both Bruce and Grey counties. And we've got drivers and their vehicles located all over.
So that kind of leads into my next question is then, if I call up and say I wanted to ride somewhere, is that a ride from my door to where we're going, or
Yep.
from when you leave to come get me to where we're going?
Yep. Primarily because if you're in a wheelchair, such as myself, you've got no option. You could go down to a bus stop possibly, but in rural areas, it's kind of hard to do that, especially in the winter. So it is a door-to-door service.
Thank you.
Councillor Coburn?
I'm in favor of looking into any and all options that help folks that are having challenges with transportation. How do we want to move forward with this? Do we want to ask staff to bring us back a report regarding potential needs for us to consider down the road? I'm happy to move that if that's the case.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Carlton, and thank you again to the delegation here. So yeah, staff were quite happy to take that away and bring back a bit of a report. We'll maybe reach out to Chatsworth and see what their experience has been like in terms of trying to get some idea of costs. We'll certainly talk to yourselves and get an idea of costs as well. Bring that back and perhaps put a few different options on the floor for council to consider how we might be able to participate.
Do we want a motion on that? Okay, so I have a mover and Councillor Winters for a seconder. Before I call the vote, I do have a question that would, if you were coming into Georgian Bluffs, do you then need to be buying more vehicles, having more drivers, or is there capacity within your existing system?
Probably start off. Probably another. Higher drive.
Okay, thank you. So if there are any other questions from council, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. Consent agenda. Does anyone have any item they'd like to pull from consent agenda? Councillor Scholdes?
May I please pull 9.3.1?
Okay. And I would like to pull 9.3.3. So the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items 9.3.1 and 9.3.3, and that all items contained therein are hereby approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Deputy Mayor Pringle. All in favor? That is carried. So Councillor Scholdes, I will go to you for 9.3.1.
Sure, thank you. So this one comes out of the town of Bracebridge. They are asking for the province of Ontario to conduct a social and economic prosperity review to look at how the province is spending money and in regards to how they can help the provincial and municipal fiscal framework. And they go on to state that nearly a third of municipal spending in Ontario for services is in areas of provincial responsibility. So I think it's important that we support them with their motion here, and it can go back and have the province look at how they go and spend their money, and that they should tighten down on how they're supporting the municipality, even for us as well. I just thought I'd put a motion forward supporting this. I think it's important.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a seconder for that motion to support this motion for Bracebridge? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Is there any discussion? Councillor Winters?
Sorry, just through you, Mayor Carlton, to staff, if we can ask a question, but we did support a motion very similar to this, and I believe it was through AMO, supporting AMO through the request. So I think we have discussed it. I'm totally in support of it, but I just want to make sure that I have clarification on that.
Any further discussion? Any other comments? No? Do we want to just put emphasis to it then? Would be my question, I guess. I guess I can do that by calling the vote. All in favor of doing this? That is carried. Thank you. And the next item, 9.3.3, is the Township of Asphodel Norwood with concerns about, through public health, about the laboratories. So because I am chair of the health unit, I reached out to Dr. Ara about this one to find out whether this is potentially a situation that's going to cause problems. And he noted that the resolution is from former senior managers of Public Health Ontario. And Public Health Ontario current management is assuring everyone, all local MOHs, that the budget cuts to these labs will not lead to a reduction of service and water testing. But as the medical officer of health for Grey Bruce, he remains concerned about this proposed change. And this item is going to be on the June Alpha meeting for Public Health Ontario Labs to provide an update on their plan for all boards of health. So he would appreciate any support that we could put behind this to make sure that there doesn't become a reduction in services going forward. So to move forward with support, I would need a mover and a seconder on this one. Councillor Winters, a seconder, please. Councillor Thompson. Any further questions? Councillor Coburn.
This is, so it sounds like it's something we ought to support, but I feel like I don't have all the information before me to make that decision. So I don't exactly know why there's been a proposal to have reductions or cost cutting measures, and maybe there's good reason to do that, but I feel like this is one where I don't feel like I really have enough information, to be honest. Were you made aware at all, Mayor Carlton, as to why the ministry might be suggesting this? Is it to find efficiencies?
No, sorry, no. And part of it, let me just flip back to this. Part of the concern is that we get into a situation where water testing isn't happening as quickly as it should, and we'll end up back in a Walkerton crisis. And I think that's coming from former staff members who have since retired, and they're looking at this coming forward with concern. Now, it was on the last Alpha meeting, and will be coming back again in June. So at this point, all we would be doing is putting support behind making sure that this is looked at very clearly, that we don't allow something to slide under the radar and get back into a Walkerton crisis. CEO Lovely.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, it's perhaps unusual for staff to comment on a discussion of this nature, but just for information, we are aware that staff have been copied in on correspondence, which has been sent to the Minister's office, echoing some of the concerns around the loss of water testing capacity in the system by the Source Water Protection Agency for Grey Bruce. So certainly, if we were to share that concern, it's a concern which has been echoed by the Source Water Protection Authority in this matter as well.
Are there any other comments on this one? I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Correspondence. Oh, item 11.1, nominations for the 2024 Ontario Senior of the Year. Does any member wish to comment on this item? do we wish to look at someone in our community to nominate for this? And I guess my thought on this is, if we were going to do that, should it be brought back to our next meeting as a closed session item? And people have time in the meantime to think about who we would nominate, because I think that's a discussion we would want to do in closed session. And I just lost my train of thought. Councillor Scholz, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say this is something that I fully support for sure. And I would agree that we should go maybe into closed session and discuss it further and then figure out who would like to nominate. I think that's a good idea.
So I think at this point, we would just forward it to our next meeting to add to a closed session discussion at that time. I know what I was thinking. The deadline is April 30th, so we do still have a little bit of time. So maybe if we just put it out there for, if anyone thinks of anyone that could be nominated from the municipality, that we bring that forward. I see the clerk giving me a funny look.
Maybe Mayor Carlton, my apologies. I had just had a thought. We will be calling a special council meeting on April 17th, following committee of the whole. So it may be a benefit to expand the scope of that special meeting to include a closed session discussion. And perhaps I could assist council in bringing forward some of the previous applications that have come through for the Senior Volunteer of the Year for Georgian Bluffs, if that would be helpful at all.
I think so. Okay. So we don't need a motion at this time. That's just direction for the next meeting. Okay, perfect. Committee reports. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on April 3rd, 2024 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2024-025 to COW 2024-034. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Scholz. Is there any discussion? Councillor Coburn?
If I may, I'd like to pull item 12.1.4 for further discussion. This is in regards to the Bass Lake access.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so we will revise that recommendation to exclude I need to have the 2024-005, I think. -28, sorry. Yes, I need to get to the next page. So we will exclude that, and I will call the vote then on the rest of the items, all in favor. And that is carried. Now, do we move to discussing that item now? Okay, so the recommendation from that item is that council provide support for the Bass Lake Access Association to seek necessary approvals from the Niagara Escarpment Commission and the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority and any other required agency for the installation of steps and a dock on township property on Bass Lake between 139 Lakeview Drive and 139 South Bass Lake Road, and that the Bass Lake Access Association be requested to provide written support for the steps and dock by the immediate neighbors to the township's property, being 139 and 138 Lakeview Drive and 129, 136, and 139 South Bass Lake Road, and that council direct staff to develop an agreement with an initial term of 5 years and a subsequent right to further extend for 5 years with the Bass Lake Access Association for the installation and management of said steps and dock, and that subject to the regulatory approvals and permits, including a building permit from the township, that the association be permitted to erect and then manage steps and a dock on Bass Lake. I need a mover and a seconder on that item. Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Discussion. Councillor Coburn.
So I have taken some time over the past week to consider this item a little further. And while I commend the association for the work they've done, I do still have some lingering concerns, and I'm having trouble feeling like I can support this at this time. This has been reminiscent for me of the Shallow Lake Dog Park, where we, I believe, have maybe put the cart before the horse and then had to pull back on the reins. I don't know that we have done our due diligence in our public engagement. We've heard from some voices, but not all. And over the last week, we have heard from some other voices. And I don't feel like that public engagement has been done adequately. I also believe that public engagement should be done by us, the municipality, because it is our property. Further to that, and perhaps more importantly, I need to consider equity. We have been telling lots of folks who are showing an interest in asking us to do certain things with that shoreline property in front of their homes that we can't make a decision now. We need to wait until we have the study done and some plans in place, and we want to make a decision for the entire municipality at that time so that it's fair and equitable. And yet at the same time, we're telling a group of people that they can go ahead and erect stairs and a dock on our property, and that involves shoreline as well and water access. So I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I don't want folks to feel like we are putting one group of folks ahead of the rest, and I'm feeling uncomfortable about that. So I don't believe I can support this at this time, unless I hear something that's more compelling over the course of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Any comments from anyone else on council? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, so I had my reservations too originally when we had talked about it and had the delegations here and stuff too. But for me, I am in support of having staff and the group move forward together as a group to see what we can accomplish. There is a ton of hurdles to get over yet before this ever goes anywhere. Right now, for us to say yes today, that just gives them the opportunity to go to the Niagara Escarpment, Gray Salvo Conservation, every other hurdle they got to jump over. And then we'll get feedback from those other groups, whether it's a good idea, bad idea. And that should give us some guidance down the road too, as what goes on with shoreline road allowance. So I'm in favor of us moving this forward just for the fact that we get to hopefully hear from those other groups to see what has happened, what changes can happen, or maybe nothing's going to happen. That's the information I'm really looking for. I believe with staff's effort in working with the group, we can make a lot of progress on the whole situation for all of Georgian Bluffs. And without the go ahead from either the NEC and the Gray Salvo, it's dead in the water anyway, depending on their approval. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Winters.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with both my colleagues. I think they're both very important points that you make. But one of the things that is going to happen during this process is that the NEC will have a public process as well that will be able to, and hopefully the township can piggyback on that and maybe even put that out as part of the consultation during the NEC's application commenting period. I think you can do two birds with one stone. But I think it's important that we do go out and look for the broader advice and an opinion of our constituents that are out there. But I think there is quite a hurdle to be accomplished here, and it's going to be over a year before we get there. But I think to keep it moving forward and then again broaden that public commenting period.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Coburn.
I guess I'm just curious to hear from my council colleagues how they're feeling about the other piece whereby we have denied folks an answer on what they're allowed to do with the portion of the shore road allowance in front of their property because we're waiting for the study, and yet we're essentially giving the green light to go ahead with this tonight. I'm looking for some comments about that piece, which I think is really important. And then pending that, I will be asking for a recorded vote in this one.
Thank you. Councillor Lovely. Councillor Lovely. My apologies. I just moved you up to the horseshoe.
To you, Mayor Carlton. I'll issue a brief comment before the conversation goes on that question. Just to say that this is actually very similar to the sorts of things that are allowed at this point on the shoreline road allowance. So Anyone can approach the township at this point in time and ask to put a dock in off the shoreline road allowance, and that would be something which would be supported. It's supported in thousands of places around the shoreline, both the Georgian Bay and the inland shoreline areas. And the steps being suggested at this point are similar to some of the sort of landscape amenities that would be permitted under the bylaw that was discussed the other week, subject to a permit, something that doesn't interfere with the right of passage along the shoreline road allowance. This wouldn't go all the way across it. And docks, as I say, are something which is supported by ministries beyond us. So the MNRF actually supports the installation of docks off the shoreline.
Thank you for those comments. I think I would also agree with what the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Winters have said. This moves the process along, but doesn't give permission for anything to happen until everything else is in place. And while that part of the process is moving forward, the public consultations can take place as well, so that we keep things moving and don't stop right here until we do a public meeting over the whole issue. And that will take part with NEC. So at this point, I will turn it over to the clerk, I think, unless there's other comments. Councillor Thompson.
So good comments. I don't disagree with anything that's been said. Directly to the question about shoreline, our study on the shore road allowance, I could be wrong, but I don't want to marry the two together, because I think this is about a road allowance and property that we own that has access to a lake. And we're considering an access to that lake. But for me, the concern is about liability, because it is a treacherous access at that point, or potentially treacherous access at that point. And it's been something we've tried before and failed. So I guess I agree and disagree with what my colleagues. I agree that I don't want this process to stop in its tracks today. But I also am not sure that the recommendation that we have in front of us moves as pragmatically as I would need it to, because I think that my concern would be that last one is that, subject to things moving well, we'll have a building permit and that the association is permitted to erect and then manage the steps. So I don't know that, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. It's going to be hard for me to approve it with that last piece in there, because it sort of gives an illusion that we're saying, go ahead and do some of these things, and then we'll do the building permit. And I don't think it allows for that public consultation that we're talking about there. So, I mean, as it sits, I think that is a bit problematic, but I don't want to see the project end.
Thank you. And Councillor Day.
I'm grateful that Councillor Thompson went first and voiced something that I can stand behind in terms of this statement as it stands, with the building permit being included in the motion. I do not feel comfortable with it at this point in time. I feel like many good things have been said around the horseshoe and from the staff this evening, and I agree with the sentiment of not wanting the project to completely stall. I think it's good to continue to look into it, but I really do feel like we need to make sure that all the residents on the street are aware of what is going on or what may go on, and have the opportunity to feel like their voices are truly being heard.
Councillor Coburn.
And I thank my colleagues for those comments. I could get my head wrapped around this motion if that particular change were to be made. I also would like to put the public engagement process back in the hands of staff. I don't think it's appropriate to ask a community agency to do that public engagement. I think that we need an objective third party to do that, so that people are feeling like that process has been accomplished with some due diligence. So with those changes, I would support the motion.
So we need an amended motion here, CAO.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, great conversation, and I think amending the last recommendation to include something, I was just typing away here, something on the lines of regulatory approvals and permits, and subject to comprehensive community engagement, that the township consider moving forward with an agreement, and that the building permit would follow us. Now, we can take the building permit out from that completely, because that would be it needs to happen. So we could hang that in there. To the other conversations that have been shared this evening, at the risk of pushing back slightly on the staff undertaking the engagement, I'm acutely aware that we did some fairly significant engagement with the residents last year in this area. I'm aware that there's going to be engagement undertaken through an NEC development permit application. I'm also aware that the Access Association have proposed a far more comprehensive series of consultation and engagement. My nervousness would be in that instance, which one of those are we going to listen to out of all of those different conversations that take place? And seeing as there's already quite a lot going on, it might be easier for us to join in on those existing conversations rather than recreating our own set of conversation on top of that. But I will take council's direction on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
I can appreciate that. I guess I'm a bit curious about, so we are taking a piece of our property and we're making an agreement with an association to lease it. Isn't something like that appropriate for a public meeting? Like I'm just thinking, could we be, if you know, like, let's take all of this out of play, take the public outcry or the public interest out of play, take, you know, all the pieces that we've talked about out of play. If we just at one day came in here and saw a group and said, oh yeah, you know, John Smith is going to lease this property from us for whatever the purpose, and we make a deal like that, wouldn't adjacent properties be reasonable that they would say, or other public members saying, geez, if you're going to do that, it should not come to a public forum in a way that's sort of not just, yeah, it was on the agenda. If you weren't paying attention, so sorry. You know, recommendations, you read our agenda in minutes every week. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying about the undertaking being significant, but I also think when we lease property, I think we have an obligation to maybe be a bit more transparent about, you know, having people with an opportunity and a bit of a it's the end of the day, I'm sort of stuck for that being advertised or communicated to people in the community and adjacent properties. That's just my thought.
So for you, Mayor Carlton, we can certainly do it. It would be setting somewhat of a precedent, and there's a few things that perhaps we ought to now rethink doing, because we haven't necessarily done that level of engagement outside of the council chambers on similar levels of agreement in the past. And we do restrict access to certain communities to certain other parts of public property without going through a broad engagement process in any sort of way, shape, or form. So this would perhaps be setting a new threshold for accountability, but I see no challenge with setting those thresholds. And certainly we can do that process. As I say, we'd navigate it carefully with the other agencies to make sure that people knew who they were talking to and what they were talking about. So we would structure the engagement in a way that made it, we didn't accidentally receive comments that should be going to the NEC, for example, and that we scoped it in that sort of way. But staff can certainly do that if that's the direction this evening.
So I'm looking to educate myself. So when you say we wouldn't do this, like in the past, and I'm trying to draw on my experience, but if you're going to stop up and close a road allowance or something like that, aren't we required to have a public meeting?
So I can answer that question. Council has what's called a notice or procedures of notice bylaw. It's from 2007, and it lays out which processes require which elements of notice to be provided to the public. Leasing of public lands is not included in that notice bylaw. Only the sale of or disposition of lands is included within those notice procedures.
And we will have leased properties and not gone to a public meeting?
Correct. If I may just provide an asterisk, you would not have been forced to by your bylaw to provide the notice. Whether council opted to provide the notice by their own fruition is one thing, but you would not have been required to do so by your bylaw.
Yeah, I get the requirement. I was uncomfortable with the, and I'll have to draw on some history. I was uncomfortable with the thought that we have been doing that because I couldn't think of any readily available examples where we've done something like this without a consultation.
Okay, so just for clarity, we have an amended motion. Can we read that again just to be sure what this is saying?
So I'm going to talk off the top of my head, and then Madam Clerk will correct me. So I think I had excluded it, but perhaps something along the lines of that we strike that fourth one, and there is a new recommendation that is subject to the regulatory approvals and permits, and a comprehensive public engagement led by the township. That an agreement be formed, brought back to council for approval later this year. Well, actually, I'm not going to guarantee this year because we'll have to wait until the NEC.
So it could reflect pending NEC approval.
That would work.
Councillor Winters.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest something to the tone or tune of that, subject to regulatory approvals, permits, public engagement, and executed agreement with the Township of Georgian Bluffs. The association be permitted. That gives us public engagement. It gives us an executed agreement. There are 2 outs still to come along that process.
Okay, so we're clear on that. I'm going to go back to Councillor Coburn. You were asking for a recorded vote on the original motion or the amended motion?
That was on the original, so I can pull that now if we have an amended motion.
Okay. So I don't have a mover and seconder yet on the amended motion. I think we do.
Could we read that official amended motion?
Thank you.
Mayor Carlton. So just taking Councillor Winters' suggested amendment, that's subject to the regulatory approvals and permits and public engagement and executed agreement that the association be permitted to erect and then manage the steps and dock on Bass Lake.
Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was good with that to start. So Councillor Thompson is moving and Councillor Coburn seconding. Any further discussion? Okay, so a recorded vote on that. Turn it over to the clerk to do that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate your vote in favor of or against. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
Or
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
4.
Councillor Rick Winters.
4.
Councillor Tobin Day.
Or
Councillor Isaac Shouldice.
4.
Deputy Mayor Pringle.
4.
Mayor Sue Carlton.
4.
Thank you. That vote carries.
That one is carried, and we are back then to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on that? I will call the vote then. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And just let me get over to the next item here. We are on to staff reports. I'll read the recommendation and then I think Brittany is going to speak to this one. Whereas council authorized 2024 capital projects through strategic planning sessions in the fourth quarter of 2023. And whereas council approved the 2024 operating and capital budgets at their meeting on March 6, 2024. And whereas the township's purchasing policy requires council authorization on awarding budgeted items over $20,000. Now therefore, all tenders and proposals as appended to this report are hereby authorized, and that staff be directed to execute and complete any necessary administrative actions to facilitate awarding of the contracts. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councilor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. And just before we proceed with this, all of the awards are included within this motion. If anyone on council wants to discuss any one of those items separately, we need to pull it from this for separate discussion. Councilor Winters.
I'd like to pull all of them because I think each and every one of those reports should be spoken to separately. I wasn't overly impressed on how I saw them all lumped together because I think each one should be discussed and awarded on its own merit and not as a group.
Okay. Brittany, did you have any comment to make on this one then? Or are we turning to doing each one individual?
I'm okay with either. Just to give a little bit of background, I was going to note that this format looks slightly different than what you would have seen in the past, mainly given that all 7 of the reports have been appended to this covering report. You'll also notice that all of these reports are presented in the council sphere, whereas staff predominantly aim to have all of your reports on committee agendas, being that committee of the whole on a monthly basis. Considering the amount of projects that were approved out of the budget process this year, staff had quite a bulk of reports scheduled for the April sessions. We presented this report and these 7 this evening at the council sphere simply to spread out some of the business throughout this month and not to overwhelm agenda packages, specifically that of last week, which was already very content heavy. So we have elected to present these 7 proposals for your consideration this evening. We simply combined them into one report only because council has seen these items already on multiple basis throughout the budget cycle, mainly throughout their strategic priority setting, and then again allocating the cost throughout the budget cycle. As Councillor Winters has requested, all of these items can be pulled and discussed separately should council wish to do so. We simply presented this avenue as a efficiency mechanism for your meeting, but again, should you wish to discuss them individually, that option is more than available to you.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that, Councillor Winters, you still want to proceed with them all individually? Okay, not a problem. So the first item is 13.1.1.1. And the recommendation in that one is that staff report DEV 2024-020, award of contract for 2024-05 biennial OSIM and asset management be received as information, and that a contract with the firm of Pearson Engineering Limited for tender 2024-05 in the amount of $44,370 excluding HST be awarded, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a contract for services. Could I have a mover and a seconder there, please? Councillor Winters, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Who am I turning to on staff? Kevin?
I'll take this one, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening to you, the mayor, and to members of council. I'm present to you staff report 2024-20 for the recommendation of the board of contract for the biennial OSIM, which is the Ontario Structural and Special Manual, and for assistance with the asset management plan. So staff procured for an RFP, which is a request for proposal on February 2nd, and the closing date was on February 27th. 12 proponents took out a bid package. 5 proponents and 5 submissions were received. Those submissions were then further evaluated through an evaluation team consisting of internal staff, for ranking, and those rankings provided that Pearson Engineering was the highest scoring at 81.20% of the technical proposal score and had won the lowest submission bids of 39,370,000. So during the proposal, I have to mention that during the proposal, staff found efficiencies for recommendation of the OSIMS inspections for years 2024 and 2026, and to carry on asset management for the years and budget recommendations for years 2025, 2026, and 2027. So essentially, this proponent, Pearson Engineering, if approved today, would guide staff in a 10-year budget proposal and a 10-year capital budget of bridge replacements and repairs. And that will be submitted to council during the budget deliberations in 2025. So with that being said, staff are recommending to award the contract to Pearson Engineering for the amount of $39,370,000.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
No questions. I mean, I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin. It was a great report. And it clarifies some things that I'm glad to finally see. Is not only we're doing our mandatory OSIM inspections on a biannual basis, but we're also moving forward with recommendations in a capital plan. And I do commend you looking at that, the way that that's been done. And actually found some savings and efficiencies moving forward. So I wanted that to be spoken out in council. I didn't want all that to be brought in together. But no, I think that's a great report.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Just a practical question to continue my own journey in learning about different matters on council. How is the technical proposal score calculated?
Through the mayor to Councillor Day. So the technical proposal, without going through a long-winded explanation, focus on the proponent to provide to staff a submission of the technical proponent, looking at various aspects of the proponent. When I mean proponent, I mean the consultant or engineer. So for example, project managers in the project manager role, how many years their experience, has the consultant proponent engineer completed OSIM inspections before? Have they done asset management before? What kind of value do they bring to this municipality is what we were looking for. And they provided that through a technical submission, and staff rated that based
Great.
on weighting.
Thank you. I appreciate the context.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I will call the vote on that item. All in favor? And that is carried. Next item. So the recommendation on the next item for award of contract for surface treatment is that staff report DEV 2024-020, award of contract for 2024-05, biennial OSIP. We're in the wrong one. Now I've got the right one. My apologies. Recommendation that staff report DEV 2024-021, award of contract for 2024-02 surface treatment program be received as information, and that council approves any actual overages to be funded from the same funding source as budgeted, and that a contract with the firm Miller Paving Limited for tender 2024-02 in the amount of $354,718.63, excluding HST, be awarded, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a contract for services. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn and Deputy Mayor Pringle. And Kevin, we're back to you.
Thank you. And to you, the mayor, and to members of council, yes. So staff are recommending the award of contract 2024-02 in the amount of $354,718.63 to Miller's Paving Limited. As you may recall during the budget deliberations, concession 21 was proposed for full depth rehabilitation, meaning pulverization, and topped up with a single double surface treatment. And actually, during budget deliberations, a different technique of road rehabilitation was proposed. Staff took those recommendations and heard the voices of council's concern and went to more of a traditional technique that the municipality has completed before in the past. And that essentially means pulverization of the road, topped up with a granular A base to reshape and reform the road base and to solidify it, and then topping it with a single and a double surface treatment for approximately 2,005 meters of road section on concession 21 from Thompson Side Road to Zion Church Road.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Winters.
Kevin, so good report. So it is just a double surface treatment going down as the first layer, a single going on the second. I assume you're doing a couple of inches of A gravel to kind of shape and any geotextile, any sort of cold in place. And the reason I bring that up, I don't know if council's had a chance to drive concession 24, but your brand new road looks like a 10-year-old road. And then my second question to this will be what kind of warranty, how are we policing our previous works, and what are we seeing for our value for our dollar?
So just on the through to Councillor Winters' question, concession 21 hasn't been identified for any geotextile upgrades. There is no low-lying areas that are to be considered to be, I guess, moist soils, such as may see in a low drainage area, swamp area, for example. Section 21 is fairly high and dry, if you will. It's not really a technical term. Staff are proposing that in future works, there is chances for efficiencies. One is completing geotechnical studies beforehand so that staff can have a better understanding of what technologies would be best. As we'll see later on in the night, for a recommendation of traffic counts, which will better aid staff's ability on our service levels and which roads will require different technologies. Technologies including cold in place, double surface treatments, single surface treatments. So all that will be considered in future years. And to the second point, within the contract, staff are holding contractors accountability with the 2-year warranty.
Councillor Winters.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's just my questions. And I was glad to hear no geotextile because I don't think it was warranted. And the reason I was asking that is just we're a little over budget and if there was any cost savings, but doing block to block makes sense and doing what we have to do. So my question then through the mayor to Samantha is it talks about a reserve fund for taking the balance, the remainder of the funds required out of a reserve balance. What is in that balance?
So thank you through your mayor. So this is the CCBR or your former gas tax that we are recommending the overages to be funded from at the end of 2023, taking into account all amounts that you had proposed to be funded from there. It had a balance of $308,000. We will be receiving more gas tax funds, in 2024. I don't have that in that amount right in front of me, but there will be sufficient funds within that reserve to cover this overage.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Bear with me while I get to the next one. So the next item is the recommendation is that staff report DEV 2024-022 award of contract for 2024-03 7th Street Southwest Road Rehabilitation be received as information, and that a contract with the firm of RF King Holdings Limited for tender 2024-03 in the amount of $93,248 excluding HST be awarded, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a contract for services. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Shouldice, Councillor Thompson. And Kevin, back to you.
Thank you. And to you, the mayor, and to members of council. Staff are recommending to proceed with the contract 2024-03 in the amount of $93,248 with the firm RF King Holdings. And this will include the rehabilitation of 7th Street Southwest, which includes the replacement of stormwater drainage and repaving the hot mix asphalt that's currently failed on the 115-meter stretch of dead-end road in that section. So the bidding opportunity was open on February 9th and it closed on March 5th. 11 companies obtained bid packages and 3 bids were submitted. The lowest bid was submitted by RF King Holdings Limited in the amount of $93,248. So it was a competitive bid and staff are recommended to proceed with the contract award.
Thank you. Any further comments and questions? I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried. And next item being the award of contract for traffic count services. So the recommendation that staff report DV 2024-023 award of contract for 2024-06 traffic count services be received as information, and that council approves any actual overages to be funded from the same funding source as budgeted, and that a contract with firm Traffic Survey Analysis Inc. for tender 2024-06 in the amount of $51,125 excluding HST be awarded, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a contract for services. And back to you again, Kevin.
Thank you. And to you, the mayor, and to members of council, yes, staff are recommending the award of contract 2024-023 in the amount of $51,125 to the firm Traffic Survey Analysts Inc. And this firm will be completing various traffic studies in the spring and summer and the fall months. More particularly, hopefully we can get them out there in the end of April and again in September, August time. And what they will be doing is taking traffic counts, and that will help staff determine the annual average daily traffic movements, where we can better analyze our road networks and our levels of service. As mentioned before, that will in turn provide staff with a confident look at future budgets and capital roadworks, including different technologies as to how we rehabilitate and maintain our roads. So 7 companies, the bidding was issued on February 16th and closed on March 12th. There were 7 companies that attained the bid packages. 3 proponents or bidders submitted bids. 1 bid was rejected on the basis that it was submitted after the deadline and it was incomplete. The lowest bid was in the amount of $51,215 to Traffic Survey Analysts Incorporated. Staff are recommending to move to award the contract.
Thank you. And pardon? My apologies. Could I have a mover and seconder on that one, please? Councillor Coburn and Deputy Mayor Pringle. There's no further discussion. Deputy Mayor Pringle, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Carl. Just curious, like out of the 3 that we got, 1 was rejected and then the other one's not even close. And there's 1 that took. How do we get such a wide spread of numbers on what's how do we get 40,000 more into the first guy? That was the first question.
I'll take a general stab at that through you, Mayor Carlton. It's hard to tell. There's one or two in here that you'll see that there are some outliers. In fact, actually, I think you saw it last time when we awarded the contract for sidewalk maintenance. Quite often, you'll find a contractor will put in a number without that number being realistic necessarily to the work that's being done. And that is so that the contractor has a bid in. We're aware they're interested in working with the township. It might be that they have a fully committed slate of business that year, and so they'd be bringing on additional costs to undertake this work if we did award it to that individual. It could be that they just have a misunderstanding of the nature of the job and haven't had that conversation with us as we've gone through the tendering process. There are a number of different reasons why we might get bids which are outliers. Generally speaking, we do like to see clustering, and there was some clustering, as I understand it, on this one, although we obviously do have some outliers on there. So there are a number of reasons why we might get contractors that put in quite significantly different prices. Sometimes you get low bids, and they're as concerning as the high bids in many instances, and sometimes contractors will be putting in a high bid on the off chance that we need to award the work that year, and they might be the only one that submits.
Thanks for that. No, it's, yeah, I guess you do have your companies out there that'll take, if you're gonna pay it, I'll take it, right? So for sure, I get that piece of it. Just a comment on my own behalf here. I noticed in all of the ones we're looking at today, we're taking red money to it, red money out of reserve, red out of reserve. How do we get to the point where I would rather hear you come back and say, we're gonna say $5,000 RFP? Is it, what's the process in us putting that RFP out there to be on the high side as opposed to being on the low side of it? Does that make sense? I'd rather you guys come back and say, we don't need that little RFP, we're gonna save some money. Instead of us taking out reserve, taking out reserve, taking out reserve. Thanks.
So if I may, something that we did different with our 2024 budget is that all capital projects are being funded from reserves. So the amount that you have committed, that's what I want, the amount that you have committed when the RFP is less than what we are budgeting, now that opens up that reserve to have more funds available for other projects that you may have, whether that is saving towards future capital, or if something new does come up that you wish to move on and investigate and see if that's an opportunity. So that is something that changed within this. It also, when you are doing and going through your 2024 year end, by funding all capital projects from your reserves, it eliminates any capital surplus at the end of the year. That can make for easier accounting, that come the end of the year, any surplus that is in there would be from your day-to-day operations only.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I might just add to Ms. Buchanan's comment there is that I think what would be good this year is we're having a really good year thus far. And overall, of the funds that were committed against the projects from reserves through the budget process, we've actually used less funds so far. So there have been some that are over, have been some that are under. It can be difficult to see those unders. So what we'll do is we will commit to bringing back at some point this year, and I will take this away with the treasurer, but we will bring back what did you commit in the reserves this year? What did we actually spend in the reserves this year? We will make sure we bring that back. So you can see overall, against all the capital that you allocated in reserve against projects, how much of that capital got spent? Did we go over or did we go under?
Excellent. If there's no further comments, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Next item is RFT 2024-09 supply hauling and placement of quarry source granular M gravel 2024. So the recommendation is that report CES 2024-005 be received for information, and that RFT 2024-09 for the supply hauling and placement of quarry source granular M gravel be awarded to Walker Aggregates at a price of $17.50 per ton. I think I'm turning to Jerry on this one. Oh, mover and seconder, sorry. Trying to move Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Thompson. Jerry.
Through you, Mayor Carlton. The staff went through an RFP process as noted to procure the granular required to top up our gravel roads.
2 submissions were received as noted in the report. No real change here of previous years, and we're recommending award to Walker Aggregates, who have been municipality supplier in the past.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Pringle.
I just, when I read there, if there is an option for the second year, is that something we want to consider? Or has that been considered in this?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, it's available. We don't have to choose on this now. It'll be at next year upon successful having a successful contract year the first year. Then we can negotiate with them on whether they do want to enter into a second year. We can choose if we want to enter into a second year. So we are not at this point in time handcuffing us into the second year. It's a possibility.
I'm just thinking of the fact that it's 1750, there's probably not going to come down.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Winters.
And that was through you, your mayor. That was kind of my comment is it's not going to go down. We're surrounded by corporate aggregate resources now, and the price isn't going to go down. It's probably in our best interest to execute a 2-year contract at this time. Second question is the amount of gravel roads that we have, Jerry, is this about a third of them? Is this about a half of them that we're graveling this year?
Mayor Carlton, it is about a quarter, maybe even a little bit less than a quarter. It's going to end up being about, it shows on that map that's attached to the report. We're doing about 28 kilometers of road at approximately 375 ton per kilometer is the rate. Yeah, so it will work out if we keep at this same rate, to probably being once every 5 years that our roads receive maintenance gravel.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Do we need to do the 2-year, or it's negotiable later in the year at that same price?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, it would be good because there were 2 conversations there, slightly nuanced and different. The way in which the contract would be written at this point is we have an option for a second year, which we don't need to pull. We've got the opportunity to check that contract performance is satisfactory before we do so. But I think I also heard the opportunity that might exist to secure and lock down a second year of pricing at this point in time and actually do that regardless of the performance we see this year.
Councillor Winters.
Depending how the contract's structured, I keep hearing the word negotiate a second year. And I don't like that word negotiate because that doesn't mean the price is the same. If the price says it will be the same and the township has the right to extend it for a second year at the same price, I'm good with that. If it says either party can negotiate for the second year, I struggle with that one.
So do we know if we can actually lock them in for that second year?
So you, Mayor Carlton, just give staff a couple of seconds here to work this one out.
Yes.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, this is how the contract term is worded in the RFT. So the agreement will be for 1 construction year to cover the period of approximately May to May of 2024 to 2025. At the sole discretion of the township, an offer may be extended to the winning bidder that should they maintain the tendered price, an optional 1 construction year extension to continue as the township supplier for supply, hauling, and replacement of quarry source granular M gravel until April 30th, 2026. So therefore, they have the ability to say, no, we don't want the second year, but we have the ability to at least ask them to keep it. It wasn't that it was for a 2-year contract term. It was for a 1 with the possible second.
That answer the question, Councillor Winters.
Yeah, it answers the question, but I think in light of the economic climate that's out there and the lack of aggregates that exist locally, we should be looking at multi-term contracts moving forward. Because it's never going to go down. It's never going to get cheaper.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, if I might, I think if council was so inclined to add a further direction to staff, we could approach the winning contractor and see whether they would be interested in signing up for a 2-year deal at this price right now, so that we've had that one on the table and off the table and done dusted right now. See whether we can pull that one at this point. They may not be interested, but we can. There's no harm in asking.
Can we leave that one then as direction to staff? And if it's possible to extend that a report come back to council?
So I think we could do it much cleaner than that. I think this could be simply a recommendation. If council was happy, they could just put a recommendation on the table that we explore extending the pricing for a further year at the point of award. See if we can get this as a 2-year contract.
Okay, so then I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. Any further questions? I will call the vote. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. Was that an amendment to the motion or was that a new motion? Okay, so then back to the main motion and I will call the vote on that one. All in favor? Carried. Okay. And the next one is recommendation that report CES 2024-006 be received for information and that RFT for the supply and delivery of bulk highway salt be awarded to Cargill Salt Road Safety at a price of $92.49 per ton. And can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Thompson. Jerry.
Through you, Mayor Carlton. Through the Grey County procurement process, we entered into a tender process with Grey County, along with other municipalities, area municipalities, to procure the salt supply for an extended period of time. So year 1, 2, and 3, with 2 additional years through negotiations with the supplier at that time. As you will note in the report that there was a fairly significant price increase. We did receive 2 submissions with the pricing noted as $92.49 per ton and $96.77 per ton respectively. And we recommend, one more statement there is that it was a 10% increase from the previous contract. Staff are recommending award to Cargill Salt Road Safety.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. And the last item here, recommendation that report CES 2024-007 be received for information and RFT 2024-12 for the supply and delivery of 1 new brush chipper be awarded to Douglas PowerTech Enterprises, Inc. for $127,271.32, HST included, and that $37,271.32 from the fleet equipment reserve be utilized to cover the overage not accounted for in the 2024 budget of $90,000. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scholz, Councillor Thompson. Jerry, back to you.
Through your Mayor Carlton. As noted, we entered into a RFT process through our normal procurement process. We had several submitters that you'll notice in there, 3 submitters, 1 ending up being non-compliant. as you noted, it did come in over budget from the original budget deliberation cost of 90,000. Beyond the timing from the budget report that was presented to council in December, further investigation was taken place. One for the market, as well as talking directly to frontline staff with regards to diesel versus gasoline, horsepower requirements, tree size, or throat access in the chipper, as well as winch option on the chipper itself. We therefore do recommend the award to Douglas Power Tech for the Bandit 15 XPC brush chipper at this time. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Winters?
I don't always have to go first. A couple of questions here, and again, trying to put it all in the same perspective as we did last week. Budget's still very close in my mind, where we budgeted $90,000. A month later, we're saying, well, we missed that by 37,000, so let's just go for it. That was the first thought I had, and I was not inclined at all to support this because of that, and probably still am not. Looking around, just generalization out there, the new diesel motors are what they call a Tier 4 motor, which are very high maintenance as far as particulate filters. I think we can see that in our parks department when we buy a diesel motor over 30 horse. There's a cost of ownership of cleaning exhaust filters. I get the rationalization for diesel. Is it required? No. I think that's a frivolous thing there. I look at a throat of 15 inches wide. Yeah, it'll take more brush, but my reservation is that we're going to try to put 15-inch material through this chipper, and that's a waste of wood, which should be cut up and left on the roadside for people to utilize themselves. I agree with the winch. I don't agree with the extra horsepower. Don't agree with the diesel, and I certainly do not agree with the requested overage for this based on the budget information. I think there are other models out there that would serve our needs, serve our residents well, and keep us within budget limits.
Thank you. Are there Deputy Mayor Pringle?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, I'm definitely going to echo Council Winters on this too. That was my first thoughts when I look at it too. I get the diesel aspect. Why we want to go with diesel? I run diesel equipment every day, and my job there and our newer stuff is the worst stuff to run. They're forever fixing. It's terrible. So, even though gas is maybe not as efficient, we may have to find a way to supply it with gas. That's something we can always look at. There's ways of doing it. I just, again, to spend the extra 37,000 to upgrade to that size, I want to see that chipper working every day. Are we going to rent it out? It should be going every day at that kind of money to go get a chipper. So again, the difference in road size, again, as Councilor has mentioned, that would should be left on the side of the road for people to use or cut up and use for their own property. I do struggle with the diesel side of it. I just know how they work and operate today. I, again, also not sure I can support this.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
Okay, through you, Mayor Carlton. So the three that are noted here, they all have winch models, just so everyone is aware. The winch in particular is one reason why these jumped up in a higher model. I have not received any documentation from any of these suppliers that they can provide a winch on any smaller model. So if we still want to go on that, and that is my recommendation, if council would like to go with the cheaper version with a gas engine, then that Brandt tractor one meets all the other requirements. I believe I'll have to review that, but it comes with the winch at $104,495. Again, the fueling issue is kind of a considerable health and safety type issue unless we're trucking the trailer back and forth to the fuel depot every time it needs fuel. Otherwise, we'll be using jerry cans and that kind of stuff, which isn't a great thing to always have sitting around and fueling on odd equipment and all that. There's a few things that it ends up causing a bit of issues with, but we're open to whatever council is recommending.
Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. So you're saying the difference between the Douglas Power being diesel and tractor being gas, is really the two different differentials in those two for $8,000?
Through your Mayor Carlton, I will have to just check on that for sure, but I do believe that is just the main difference between those two.
Councillor Winters.
That addresses some of the concerns, but the other one was I get the idea of the winch and ergonomics for the employees and whatnot. But I'm pretty sure most of the arborists out there and the full-time guys don't have the winch. And I'd really like to see this maybe go back out for another RFT with the parameters that we're looking for. You know, we don't necessarily need the 15-inch throat. We would like a winch if available. We want a gas engine. I think that's the most open and transparent. Is trying to pick apart 3 current bids that come through. I know how bidding works. But again, I think we need to get down to that $90,000 budget. What I would support. That was what we did. That's what we did for our residents, constituents. And spending $1 more than that, I'm not interested at this point in time.
Thank you. Now, the one item I think that you said, Jerry, was that you went out to staff to ask what requirements were there or what they felt. So this is the guys that would actually be using this, or I could just have clarification there.
To Mayor Carlton, yes, yeah, like asking the frontline staff, like what trouble points, what pain points do you have daily, all that kind of stuff. Walking up and down ditch slopes, pulling brush out of the ditch, having to spend more time cutting up chunks into smaller chunks versus being able to pull it right to the chipper from not the whole top of the tree, but major parts of it, and being able to feed it directly into it for the winch, that kind of thing. So yeah, like these not extra, but additional items that weren't taken fully into consideration at the time of the budget deliberation. These are the items which kicked it up into a model above. The throat size wasn't a request that it was a 15-inch throat size. It just ended up being that the model that could supply the diesel engine at the horsepower we required, along with the winch options, ended up being a 15-inch throated brush shipper.
My apologies, Councillor Thompson. Go ahead. So let's wait and see what staff have for us here.
Yes, go ahead. I think we should sort of regroup, because I mean, I'll just speak for myself, but if we budgeted 90 and now we're at 120 or 130 or 140 or I think we had an idea and now we're shifting gears. I think we should either, I don't know that, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't know if this feels like pieces are moving fast here and we're not really sure what we're talking about. Maybe this, maybe that, I'll check on this. I think we should either vote on this one, or if we want to gather more information, let's gather more information and come back, and then the next open session we'll have some criteria to say we shifted gears in this. Just my thought.
So you, Mayor Carlton, if I may very briefly build on that. So from a staff level, we're convinced this is the right this is the right unit. If we were budgeting this today, we'd budget a different price to be able to sort this unit. And so I think where we're at, and having worked with arborist crews for the last 25 years, this is exactly the sort of unit that those crews are now using. Larger diameter. It's not necessarily we're going to put 15-inch through there. It's going to be able to handle 10-inch very easily. And so this is exactly the sort of piece of equipment. So it might well be if the tender's not awarded this evening, it is over budget. We recognise that. It might well be a case that we look for an alternative solution. We rent this year, which will come with some costs, and then we come back with a budget request as part of the 2025 budget for the appropriate unit. Probably looking at something in the order of $40,000 or $50,000 worth of rental this year, but it would work us through that process.
Thank you. And Councillor Coburn.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, it's a matter of dollars and cents, but also from staff, it's a matter of ergonomics, safety, and efficiency if they're able to put through more wood at a faster rate. I don't know that the problem is the quotes that we've gotten back so much as maybe not budgeting correctly in the first place. So I'm inclined to support it if it means safety and efficiency.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, Councillor Coburn has articulated what I was trying to say much better than I ever did. Yes, we budgeted for the wrong unit when we presented you the budget. This isn't over budget for the unit we've got. It's over the budget because we spec'd the wrong unit when we brought it out to you the first time round.
Councillor Winters.
So if I may, I mean, I assume we haven't been using our existing chipper for the last number of years. It's hidden at the landfill. I saw it tucked out there. We've been renting a unit. If you came to me and said, I rented a 12-inch gas and the guys liked it, I rented a 15-inch diesel with a winch, they really liked it, but the winch slowed down their process, I'd feel more comfortable making a decision. To make a decision to say we're going to rent and spend $40,000 or $50,000, maybe in the best interest of this municipality for 2024, and then come back and say, this is what we tried, this is what worked. The analogy that we ask everybody what they wanted, take a kid to a car dealership and see how that ends for you. There are things that do the job, there are things that are fine, and there's things that have frills. But I think at this point, time's ticking, the season's here, and I would feel better renting for the 2024 season and coming back with a formal report. This is what we tried, here's the real numbers on this, and we budget moving forward in 2025.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, loving the conversation, loving the direction we got here. If council was happy, I think you'll end up defeating the motion that's in front of us. Would you be open to us looking to see whether we could get ourselves a rent to purchase so that rental money doesn't necessarily fully go down the tubes through this year? And if it is the right unit, after we've had the opportunity to use it, whether that be a smaller unit or a larger unit, at least some of the rental dollars goes towards that. I don't know whether anybody would be out there, but we can certainly have a look around and see if that's a fact.
Okay, is Councillor Day?
I was holding a comment about concern about rental fees being good for this year, but not a long-term good financial decision for the municipality. So that answered that concern for me right away.
Councillor Coburn.
I just wondered if our treasurer, who is sneaking over to the other desk, I wonder if she had anything to add to the conversation.
Through you, my question will come, if you are looking to rent, where would you like to fund the rental fees from? Would you look to the reserve that was proposed for this? What I was quickly checking with the manager of operations, waste, fleet, and facilities was if he did have an idea where he was looking for that.
Question then through the mayor to the treasurers, where did we fund the rental for the previous years?
So while the treasurer is looking for that, through you, Mayor Carlton, just before Mr. Hahn started with us, so we stopped using the chipper, which Councillor Winters has said is currently sitting on. There will be a second report for us declaring surplus to requirements. We stopped using that chipper only in the mid to late part of last year, and that was largely as a result of health and safety concerns. The chipper that we currently had has most of these large chippers have a stop bar on the back, so that as you're getting sucked into it, it's the first thing you grab to stop the thing. The one that we have at landfill has two little cables on the inside of the chute that you have to pull. So it's a little harder to pull if you're getting sucked into it or if somebody's running up and trying to stop the machine. So that was the primary reason we stopped using the old one is the health and safety equipment on the old one simply wasn't up to modern day standards. So we rented toward the back end of last year, and it looks like Ms. Buchanan has an answer.
So through you, quick glance, and I apologize, I may have to take this away. I'm not seeing the same extent of rentals as what we would be needing this year having occurred in previous years. So in 2023, from Sunbelt, I've only found about half a dozen rentals, none of them being more than a $5,000 invoice. And it was funded from vehicle materials and supplies. So if we are looking at something that's going to be a larger cost, I will have to take that away.
Could I suggest that rather than voting this one down, we defer this one to come back with further information? Would council be in favor of that? That we defer it and look at exactly what that cost would be to rent to do the same job and that type of thing? Does that work? I'm looking to staff for a response there as well.
I think I'll weigh in first off, and Mr. Hahn can probably follow up. So through you, Mayor Carlton. So last year we definitely didn't do the volume of work that needs to be done in terms of our tree removal program. As you're aware, we're already hitting the ground a lot earlier this year than we have done. Certainly last year, we are aware that we have a very significant volume of ash tree out there along our roadways, and that's certainly going to be something that we're going to be working on. We'll also be using arborist companies to support some of that work as well, where they're beyond our capabilities or capacity to be able to manage, or where more specialist work is required. So we are forecasting the need to be using it a lot more than we have done in the past. But I think if you were to defer, that would give us an opportunity to bring this back and talk to the dealers and see what might be out there and other ways of doing this.
Do we then need a motion to defer? Okay, so is anyone willing to make a motion? Councillor Winters and Councillor Thompson. There's no further discussion, then I will call the vote to defer this item. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is carried as deferral. And we are through all of those items on to 13. Oh, sorry, vote on the original motion. Thank you. No, we deferred, so we don't have a vote on the original.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, just a procedural matter. That covering report did have a mover and seconder, so I was wondering if Councillor Coburn and the Deputy Mayor would like to withdraw that motion, and or if Council could vote that motion down, just for procedural clarity. That was the covering report to award all the RFTs.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Coburn.
I'm happy to withdraw my, did I move it or second it? I'm happy to withdraw.
So,
Good with that too.
okay, so that one is withdrawn. Thank you. Okay, so then we are on to item 13.2, the Georgian Bluffs Pickleball revised. So the recommendation there is that report CES 2024-008 be received for information, and that council direct staff to amend the 2024 fees and charges bylaw to introduce a new reduced floor rate of $17.21 for the Georgian Bluffs Pickleball Club. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Counselor Coburn? Counselor Winters? Is there any discussion? Counselor Coburn?
Just have a question for the treasurer, and I apologize, I should have submitted this in advance. A little bit of math. I'm just wondering how much less revenue the township will realize this year as a result of the altered contract and the altered rental fee.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I might weigh in. This would be a new rental, so this is all new revenue.
Maybe I didn't ask that properly. With the original contract, we had an estimate of the revenue that would be flowing through to us. And now we've got a new contract, so I'm just wondering what the difference would be. A ballpark is good.
So as the treasurer knows, I'm terrible at math, and so I will defer to her expertise on this one. But my calculation would say, working on the same basis that we had in the earlier report, that there's going to be 40 weeks of play at this rate. I reckon that by my calculation, that would be $6,884 that we would generate this year, based on 10 hours a week and 40 hours a week.
And so what was the original expected revenue? I'm looking for the difference. So you said 6 to 7?
884. I need to pull up the other report now.
And I don't wish to hold up this meeting. So if it
No, I think I've
is,
got it.
okay.
We had 650 before. The net reduction is almost exactly $2,000 less a year, because the previous charge was to be applied for 34 hours a week, 40 hours a year, 40 hours, 40 weeks a year. I suppose the offset is there's 24 hours of programming that's not being accounted for by the new rate that was accounted by the old rate. So,
Counselor Thompson?
I sort of jumped in first or second. I maybe should have waited to hear some of my colleagues speak. I just want for us to be able to answer the question of equity. So we're comparing the number to that of minor sports, which I don't love because we typically, municipal councils have a different approach to subsidizing minor sports. I do like the rationale when it matches against carpet bowlers. And so I want us to consider equity though. So what are we going to say to the roller derby people and the other adult user groups that are using Kilsyth or Kemble? So if I was the roller derby group, I'd say, well, why them and not us? So I'd like us to consider that. I do treat adult users at the arena, so during hockey season, differently because, I mean, let's face it, we run an arena at a deficit, so we subsidize everybody for that. I just am in my head having a little trouble saying to two adult user groups, you're going to pay differently than you are. So I throw that out there for us to either consider, or if nobody has any discussion about it, then that's fine. We can leave it at that.
Thank you for those comments. Any other? Deputy Mayor Pringle?
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, no, when I first seen the price coming back at 17, I wasn't thrilled with that price. Because we were comparing it to hockey, minor hockey and sports like that. It costs a lot more money for us to run an arena than it does to run two facilities we have right now. So I kind of thought it should have been a little bit higher. The offset of all that is they've really downsized the amount of hours they're going to use it. So that opens up some availability for us to have the drop-in pickleball where they're going to pay $3 a shot, and we got 20 people there, they're $60. So there is the offset to that piece of it there. So I guess at the end of the day, I kind of came to accept the way we're going to do this. I understand the roller derby piece of it too. There every week, they should be maybe getting, I don't know what kind of a deal the roller derby gets, but you're offset. So guys renting it for a ball, my guys, if you want them, they rent it once in a while for a ball or whatever. Yeah, it could open up a bit of a slippery slope kind of a scenario, but for me, with the pickleball, just strictly in the Pickleball Association here, it kind of tightened it up where we needed to be. We got 10 hours instead of 34. We're getting a little bit more money towards the arena, and that opens up the opportunity for us to have the walk-in pickleball group. So I'll offset that too. So again, we got 2 facilities sitting there. We may as well use them.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I have nothing to add to the conversation really, but I will quickly note that to Councillor Thompson's point, we are coming back with that fees discussion this year, and through the fees discussion, we can have these conversations. We haven't been approached by other user groups at this point in time for a reduction, despite the conversation we've had over the last few weeks. That hasn't been something that's come forward, but certainly something I think we need to be mindful of as we head into those conversations.
Thank you. Any other comments? I will call the vote on this then. All in favor? And that is carried. So we are on to bylaws. There are no zoning bylaws, other bylaws. So bylaw 2024-018 being a bylaw to appoint a bylaw enforcement officer be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Seeing no questions, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And the next item is the recommendation is that bylaw 2024-019 being a bylaw to establish and appoint members to the Grey Bruce Joint Detachment Board be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters and Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? None, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. There is no unfinished business, new business. Volunteer of the Year program, the recommendation. Whereas the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopted a volunteer recognition policy in December of 2021, and whereas program efficiencies may exist and have been identified through 2022 and 2023 award cycles, including the frequency and number of awards given out each year, and whereas the Township is committed to building community by recognizing its residents who dedicate their time to enhancing and bettering Georgian Bluffs through volunteer efforts in a meaningful way. Now, therefore, that staff be directed to bring back a report outlining potential opportunities for program efficiencies for consideration of council. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? Councillor Coburn, did you have any comment to make here?
Not particularly. I like the wording of the motion that the clerk has put forth. And you have worded it so delicately, and I'm not as adept at being delicate in my words. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it's been a bit of a challenge getting enough nominations for this program every year. So my recommendation would be that we look at the possible reduced awards number, but also that we do it once at the end of each term. We can have a nice celebration and have all of those folks recognized, and it won't feel as onerous. I love the way our clerk worded it. We are a mighty municipality, but we're a small municipality. So perhaps the way we have set up the awards program was a little bit more robust than it needed to be in hindsight. I'll just leave that with staff to come up with some recommendations.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion? Councillor Coburn.
I have 3, but they're not notices of motion. They're requests to have these items added to a future agenda for a future meeting. One has to do with an update on the short stay accommodation registration program. I thought was slated to take off this year, but it doesn't sound like that's exactly how it's going to look this year. So I wondered if we could have that on an agenda, an upcoming agenda. The second one has to do with committee assignments. I know that in the past we have offered up an opportunity to switch those assignments up at the mid-term mark. And I think it would be helpful, perhaps we don't switch them, but there might be some reasons why we ought to consider that. I wondered if we could ask staff to provide a list of all of the committees, working groups, boards that each member of council is on, and have a look at that for the remaining 2 years. I would love to see us tie these committee and board assignments with our strategic plan. I think that would help us stay on track, because as we know, we could get 100 different requests to be on working groups and committees in the course of a year or a term. So that would be a request. The last one has to do with complaints about use of shore road allowance. It seems that we've had a little flurry of complaints. One of the questions that has come before me as a council member is, what do individuals do after hours, so on evenings and weekends, if there is a bylaw violation? How do we get that process out to our residents so that they know what to do, who to call, and for what particular reasons? So that's it for me. They're just those 3 requests, if that's okay.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the first and the last, I can perhaps get off the list straight away. So the good news is,
if you don't mind, through you, Mayor, I would really love these to come back as an agenda item, because just for transparency, that gives folks the heads up that we are going to be talking about it, so they can tune in if they wish. I find that when we get the reports from you, it's really helpful for us at the end of the meeting, but it might not be as helpful for the residents.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the short-term accommodation update is actually on the agenda. It will be coming back before committee of the whole next time round, which is why I wanted to share that. Bringing a report back to answer a question about bylaw coverage feels excessive, but if council wishes me to write a report on bylaw coverage, I can do so.
I wasn't exactly asking for a report. I wouldn't want you to do that, but I just wonder, is that a discussion that we could have without asking a report back, or what other way? Is there a middle ground we can find? Or is there a way that we can get the word out to folks in the newsletter or online, or?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, that was where I was hoping to go just now and deal with it at this point. So we can put more information, additional information online about how to contact our bylaw services. At this point in time, we do not provide 24-hour-a-day bylaw services. We don't have significant volume of out-of-hours calls. We get the occasional 1 or 2. Those calls are responded to first thing when our bylaw officer gets back in the weekends. He does change his time up as we get into the summer season, so that we provide coverage into the evenings, we provide coverage on the weekends in response to matters, and as part of the short-term accommodation work, we will have extended hours of bylaw coverage over the weekends and everything on those sorts of sides. Again, that will be part of the report update that you'll hear later this month. But yeah, I mean, we don't provide bylaw coverage 24/7. We provide 40 hours a week of bylaw coverage, which is mixed up between evenings and weekends as we get into the season, and additional bylaw coverage to support through the short-term accommodation piece. It's not something we have significant call volume about.
Oh, thank you for that. I was totally unaware that Mr. Follis's hours switched up over the summer months, so that's fantastic to hear. And of course, I realize we can't provide 24-hour service in that regard. So yeah, it's just a matter of getting the word out to our residents as to what they can do if they have concerns or complaints. So thank you.
We'll definitely take that direction away, and I'll work with Haley to improve and look at the website and where we might be able to do that. I don't know whether the second point, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say on that one.
I would think that second one, that's a normal report that comes back through toward midterm that we will deal with at that point going forward. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Carlton. I guess I was just gonna back out the bylaw officer piece there. I guess basically at the end of the day, when he's on his off hours, you call the OPP, what your next step is. So I guess in the point of being transparent to our taxpayers, we should have that out there that he has a life too kind of thing. And after his 40 hours, then you call the OPP. It's not gonna work 24/7. So just, yeah, as long as we can get that relayed out there, got a beautiful sign up front. Signs, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other notice of motions from anyone? Okay, seeing none, we are now going to move into closed session. Can I ask for a break before we do? So we could take a break before we make that motion. So 10 minutes? Okay. Okay, so we are back in session. Councillor Thompson, you have a question? Okay, so the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs move into closed session at 7:09 PM in the council chambers with the Manager of Legislative Services / Clerk, Deputy CAO / Director of Corporate Services, Director of Development and Infrastructure, and CAO remaining in the room to discuss 18.1 personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, open meeting exemption B of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, property moves. 18.2, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, open meeting exemption K of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. And 18.3, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, open meeting exemption B of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, confidential correspondence. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. We are now in closed session. Just wait for staff to get this switched over. Okay, we are back in open session and council moved into closed session under open meeting exemption B and K of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. As a result of closed session discussions, 18.1, no action was taken. 18.2 and 18.3, direction was provided. The confirming bylaw, the recommendation that bylaw number 2024-020, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on April 10th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Winters, all in favor? That is carried. Next regular meeting, special council, April 12th at 5 p.m. at 9 a.m. Yeah. And committee of the whole, April 17th at 5. Next item, if there is no further business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Ask for mover and seconder. Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That was a long one.